Good evening, everyone. Molweni. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom. It was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief. It was the epoch of incredulity. It was the season of light. It was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope. It was the winter of despair. Dickens, I know. I'm sorry for Dickens. Let's pretend it wasn't Dickens. But I start with that because in moments like this, it is good to hold both the light and the dark. And it's difficult to live with the light and the dark. And I start this way because the line from the songs Pa sang, Tandinduli's song, gave me courage. And the first line of that song was, "Why can't we tell the truth about how it feels?" It is hard. It has been a hard, hard season. And I think it's important to just say it. That's where we began with the chair. That's where Janet began. But it must filter through everything that we have to say. We have to hold the light and the dark. And so that's where I want to begin. It is the best of times, having conversations like this, gathering tonight, but it is also the worst of times. It is a time of mourning. It's hard to gather. The chair spoke about this being a tradition. And the beauty about tradition and rituals is that on the one hand, we are able to witness and we're able to mark the moment, but we're able to do it honestly, and we must do it honestly. Rituals can only happen when there is honesty. Growing up, when we had rituals, the refrain would be, "Mabdedu bumnyama kuvele kukhanya, camaku." And mabdedu bumnyama buvele kukhanya in this moment. There's been a lot of talk about generational time tonight. Long time, deep time, thinking about families, thinking about generations. And I want to borrow the idea from Elise Boulding, the idea of a 200-year present. The idea is that you think about the oldest person in your life, and in our case, we're celebrating Mama Leah's 90th. Think of a centenarian, think of the oldest person in your life, Mama Leah's turning 90. And think of the youngest person in your life. We heard of Nozi and Melinda's 7- and 8-month-old children and grandchildren. And that our lives span those lifetimes. And so the work that we do in our lives spans a 200-year present. And so how do we live understanding that time is long and that the work that we do in rituals like this, in gatherings like this, has implications? And I guess that's what gives me hope. Generational time is that once upon a time, this would have never been possible. That once upon a time, it wasn't even imaginable that we would be having conversations like this. And so that it's possible then to imagine that once upon a time, Palestine might be free. And so time gives me hope. Understanding that people like Mam Leah and the Arch understood that time, that they were sowing into a future that they might not necessarily enjoy. Mam Leah she's 90, and we're so grateful. But I guess the invitation for me and the conviction I am sitting with tonight is my relationship with the future and how to best craft a future where we can tell the truth about how it feels, where we can tell the truth about how hard hope is, but we can also tell a story about how people lived and worked for that hope. I want to end with a small story to give a sense of that generational time and the stories that give me hope. In 1935, a young teacher walked into Inanda Seminary. Her name was Phumla Ngozwana. She was a teacher at Adams. And she made a speech at Inanda Seminary. And the speech made it into a newspaper called the Bantu World. And the title of the article that was then published in the Bantu World was The Emancipation of Women. This was in 1935, that a young black woman was also thinking about the emancipation of women in the same way we were thinking about the emancipation of women today. And so that gives me hope, is that we are part of a long conversation. We are not alone. We have eons and eons of work behind us, and that perhaps in the future, in 200 years' time, they will be telling a different story. And I do believe there will be a future. There was a wonderful poster, I think it was an exhibition at the St. John's Cathedral in New York a few years ago. And it said there are black people in the future. And I thought to myself, wow, the fact that we even need to make statements like that, I think it was in the wake of Black Lives Matter protests a few years ago, but that we can make those declarations, that there are Palestinian children in the future, there are Sudanese children in the future, there are African children in the future, there are Congolese children in the future. And so that's what gives me hope. And so thank you, Spa, for choosing Tandi's song so that we can be courageous and speak about how it feels to be a young person in a world that seems to constantly be asunder. In 1 year, we've moved from Ukraine in the headlines, and now our gaze is turned on another country, and we constantly have to be juggling all these burdens and all these heartaches. But in the heart of that are gatherings like this. And we thank the Foundation for choosing to gather in spite of that difficulty, because we must be reminded of our humanity, and rituals remind us of that humanity. And this is a public ritual that we need every single year, if only to gather and witness each other's humanity and hug each other and see each other and cry and be incredulous with each other, because it has been a time of incredulity and a time of despair. Thank you.